Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back. It's been a few weeks since we've gone live, and it is an absolute pleasure to be back with you guys tonight. I'm your host, Mark from MI Beneficials. With me, as always, we've got Brian from Rubber Ducky Isopods, Kevin from OK Calix, and a special guest tonight, Rachael from Ganjasana, as I used to call it, Ganjasana. In either way, we've cleared it with her, is kosher and still hits the mark. So, Rachael, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me here. I'm really honored to be here. I've been following all of your work for a while and just appreciate what you do in honoring the life beneath our feet.
There's so much tied to healthy soil, and I think a lot of what Ganjasana and what you, Rachael, do is bring some more purpose and some more explanation and some a deeper connection with healthy soil and the things that it offers, like healthy plants and plant medicine. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Ganjasana is and what it is that you do?
So, at the root of what I do is allowing people to see the plants as a guru. And a guru is one who removes the darkness so that you may see the light. And I see myself as a guide in this process. And so it's really a way, whether it's a ceremony or a workshop or a deeper immersion retreat, to connect with the plant spirits. And so, how do we connect with the plant spirit? Well, we need to quiet our minds enough to be able to listen and reconnect to nature so that we can receive her messages, because it's so important that we are on the same rhythm as nature and the same cycles. You know, in our modern day lives here, we have this artificial lighting, for example, and the EMF rays from our cell phones. And so all of these are disconnecting us from our natural born states. And so when we use these practices like yoga and meditation and mindfulness, we can have this intrinsic connection back to nature.
Muted. Muted.
So how did this all begin for you, Rachael? I mean, were you born with this deep connection with the earth, or was there like a period or an event or something that happened in your life that really led you this way?
I always enjoyed being outside and being in nature. And I'd say my very first plant ally was the dandelion. I remember my dad would have a perfectly manicured, mowed lawn, and he would spray all the dandelions. And I just didn't understand that concept, and I was really attached to the dandelions, and I loved to pick them. And then I had a neighbor that showed me that you could eat them. You could use their roots for making tea. It's a great liver tonic. You can eat the flowers. You can eat the whole plant. And then when I was a teenager, I discovered cannabis. And as most teens, I think, that start to experiment and work with different plant medicines or alternative states of being, we don't necessarily have a guide to show us the way or how to build right relationship with a plant such as cannabis. And so it really wasn't until I was in college and I was studying with the Shipibo tribe in the Peruvian Amazon with ayahuasca plant medicine. And there I really found and understood what it meant to have respect for the plants and how to work together with them and a sense of reciprocity. And I realized I had, in a way, been abusing the cannabis plant medicine. And it was really interesting because in ayahuasca ceremony, the shaman sings to each of you, the ayahuasquero. And when it was my turn, this person didn't know anything about me. I hadn't disclosed anything about my past. And he started singing marijuana, and I knew that word. And he was pulling out this marijuana spirit from me. And so it was during that ceremony. I'd already been practicing yoga since I was like 15 years old. So by now I'm 19, 20. And I was in this ayahuasca journey that was really difficult. And then I remembered my mudras, which are hand gestures. And oftentimes, if we're stressed or having a difficult time, like if you're anxious on cannabis or if you're having a bad trip, so to speak, you might clench your fists. And so I opened my palms into this like lotus mudra, and it changed all of my visions. It went from like complete dark and scary to a beautiful open heart connection to the universe just by opening my hands. And then I remembered my breath, my pranayama practice. And oftentimes when we have these anxious feelings with plants, we're holding our breath. And so I did my deep pranic breathing, and then I just surrendered to the experience and laid down in shavasana, which is a corpse pose where you just lay completely flat on the ground. Um, and in that moment, it was this huge transition for me in the way that I would work with cannabis for the rest of my life. And so it gave me a deep respect and reverence for the plants. And it gave me an understanding too of how to communicate with the plants in such a way, because they really do have such great medicine for us. The plants have been on the earth before us humans. Some say cannabis was gifted to us from the stars. So I'd say that's where the journey really began with Ganjasana, where I said, hey, wow, it's so important that we have these tools. Like, almost think of it like a tool belt before you even smoke weed or connect with any plant that's going to be psychoactive. Is that you should know, how to hold your body, the asanas in yoga, how to hold your hands, the mudra. Mantra, man means mine and tra means across. And so a mantra is how to train your mind. Oftentimes you'll hear people say like, oh, I don't smoke weed, it makes me anxious, or I get too much in my head. And so the mantra helps us train our mind so that we can be the architect of our destiny and like co-create with the universe or with spirit, whatever you want to call it, and have more ownership of our experiences and really go into the experience having an intention. And so not just smoking to get high, but really thinking about it and sitting down and saying, why am I going to imbibe or smoke this joint or, smoke this bowl? What's my purpose here? And what do I want to get out of it? And what can I give back to?
I love that because, and you kind of mentioned it like before this experience that you had with, out there with this shaman. You mentioned like you kind of, I don't know if you used the word abuse, but you were like misusing almost, or like
Mm.
using cannabis maybe for different reasons, and then it evolved into this deeper intention in your use. Can you explain kind of what is it like for Rachel or Ganjasana when you consume in a intention filled or mindful way?
So in our ceremonies, when we sit down, I spend about an hour preparing the body before we consume. And so on the scientific level, you can think about it as your central nervous system. We're either in the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, or most of us live in the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight. Unfortunately, most people in the world are operating in that fight or flight mode. And so it takes a lot to reground us. And so that might look like first focusing on your breath, your pranayama, which is prana, is our life force. And it begins in our navel. So our very first life force, all of us, was from an umbilical cord in our mother's womb. And so when you take the time to just sit, even if it's just 2 minutes before you smoke, and come back to the navel center and breathe in, have the navel initiate the inhalation, and then as you exhale, have the navel initiate the exhalation, you allow the breath to come deep rather than being short and shallow, which most of us are breathing short and shallow in that sympathetic nervous system. Also through music. So drumming, the sound of the drum is like a heartbeat and puts us into a different theta state in our minds so that we can come to that place of peace. And then also having an intention and taking the time to set your purpose of why you want to work with the plant. Then I also like to, of course, always work with organic plant medicine that's grown through regenerative living soil methods. But, once you have a flower, the mindfulness piece is getting to know the plant just as if you were meeting a new person or a new friend or lover. You want to take the time to get to know who they are, smelling, using all your senses, even listening, observing with your eyes, the colors of the plant, the shape of the bud. They often say the nose knows, and so when we're picking out our flower, to just see how that makes you feel, because it's an aromatic compound, and so the aromatherapy that we can get alone, you don't even have to smoke the plant. Just taking the time to slow down and become aware of your senses and aware of this deeper consciousness that you can connect with the plant in that way. And it might sound silly, but you can even tell the plant your intention before you work with it. And so this is really a lot of ancient practices that are being revived. And so different cultures have worked with cannabis for thousands of years. And in yoga comes from India and the Ayurveda, which is the science of life. And so cannabis has been named as one of the 5 sacred herbs in the Vedas. And so they would take the time to have this reciprocal relationship build with one another before imbibing in it. And so maybe even just smelling and taking a big inhalation is all that you need. And so when you're really slowing down than just doing a habitual pattern of smoking a joint or hitting your bong, you can see how this relationship will build, just like as if you're building a new friendship with a person, seeing a plant as a spirit, as a spiritual being that's going to co-create this experience with you. So those are some of the things that we might do before, and even taking a step before you work with the plants is working with the soil. And we know about all the beneficial microbes in the soil. And something that we do, I love vermicomposting, so composting with worms and holding the compost in your hands as you meditate, like through a guided meditation, is so beneficial for us on every level, from just having the microbes touch our hands on our own microbiome. There's been a lot of recent research that shows it increases our serotonin levels. The bacteria in the soil and the microbes in the soil have been shown to be even more effective than an antidepressant pharmaceutical. And so just by first putting your hands in the soil, and I encourage everybody to do that every single day, to get their hands dirty, get their hands in the soil, is going to bring us that sense of peace and that sense of joy, which is really the key here, is to relieve our suffering and to find our purpose and to find our joy in this life. Because mindfulness, by definition, is paying attention to the present moment without judgment. John Kabat-Zinn says that. And so anytime we're not being mindful, we're either feeling anxious about the past, worrying about things that we can't change, or we're feeling this sense of frustration or anxiety about the future. And so when we take the time to slow down, look at our breath, look at our body, we can stay in this present moment.
And it seems like I don't know about you guys, but when cannabis used to be illegal, it was fewer and far between than it is obviously now, when I can grow it in my backyard, I can grow it in my basement legally without having to have any stress or worries about it whatsoever. And so it was almost like back in the day, cannabis was something different to me because it was more elusive, right? And it almost seemed more sacred back then, but not for none of the reasons that you just mentioned. And nowadays, we all kind of, especially if you're in a legal state, it's easy to take the process of getting high and smoking cannabis for granted. It's easy to take the soil, the microbes, all of the organisms in the soil for granted. Nowadays you see people with a no-till garden in their basement, and this magic is seemingly happening over cycle after cycle after cycle. People are saving money. That's what gets them into it. It's saving money. But what's really happening, and kind of like you mentioned, Rachel, is it's this miracle of nature and the regenerative aspect of it. So I love the reciprocity, remembering that this plant, slowing yourself down, remembering that this plant is a gift. Nature is a gift. The things that especially for a lot of the people listening here, growing no-till, organic, regenerative, as I would call it, it's easy for us to take that process for granted. So remembering to pay homage to the soils, getting out, if you can't get outside like me right now, touching the soil in your garden indoors, making a connection with that. But the thing that I really love about your process is forcing yourself to take that time to really reflect, instead of it just being another, getting high, or alleviating whatever the feelings are in your head, making some sense of it before you imbibe. So I really love that about your process. And for a lot of us, it doesn't come to us as naturally as it seems. Like, you had that amazing experience that was kind of your coming of age, your coming of a much bigger and brighter understanding of this thing. So is there anything that you could say to our listeners or to us, like, obviously we're not all going to have the opportunity to go out and see a shaman and maybe not have the same rapport or have the same light and energy coming off of us that it's so clear for somebody to kind of connect with you. But it seems like you have like a system in place with the way that you do your plant medicine practices in conjunction with yoga. Can you explain, what someone could expect, other than obviously, your preparation? Is it like smoking before you go into some purposeful yoga, or is it more than that? I guess explain to us kind of how your yoga seminars work.
Yeah. I guess I kind of explained the beginning, the preparation, getting to know the soil and understanding the whole concept of regenerative farming. And so we oftentimes will call it feeding the soil rather than feeding the plant. And so feeling that connection to the earth through our hands, through our meditation practice, like guided visual meditations to reconnect with the earth, to connect with the plants. And then, we do smoke during ceremony. And something that's really cool is the story of Lord Shiva from the Vedas. And he is the Lord of Ganja. And so there was a story where the demons came to the earth and they poisoned the oceans. And so Shiva had to drink the poisons to save the planet. And they made a drink to then cool him down and heal him. And that was called bhang, Bhang, if you've ever heard of bhang. And it's made with cannabis and milk and honey. And so when you look at the scientific properties of cannabis, it actually does have a cooling effect onto the body, and it helps stabilize our digestive systems. It helps our lymphatic systems, our immune system. It really brings a sense of homeostasis to all of our physical systems in the body. And so when Shiva drank this bhang, he had what was called the Kundalini awakening. So from if you think of a serpent, from his tailbone all the way up through the top of his head, he had this Kundalini awakening from the cannabis plant. So when we smoke, we let Lord Shiva know that we're about to imbibe. So you might have heard people say, Bom Shiva. And then he has a whole mantra that's Om Shiva Shankara Hari Hari Ganja. And so that's a Sanskrit words of saying we're about to imbibe in the ganja. And it's like letting the gods know, letting our spirits all around us know that we're about to light up. And then something else really cool about looking at the process of smoking and the plant medicine is all the elements that are involved. So if you do have some type of water piece, like a chalice or something, you have the water, you have the plants, which are the earth, you have the fire, and then the smoke is the air that comes out from it. And so just recognizing that as well. So having your intention and then using the pranic tools of taking a deep inhalation, holding the smoke in the body, and then exhaling it out with intention is part of that whole ceremony of how we smoke. And if you've a lot of times in India or different cultures will say Bombalina, Bom Shiva. And so that's really like a prayer. It's our prayer to open up the space, right? And so once we do that, then I'll go into a guided yoga class. So that's the asana part. In Sanskrit, asana is the actual movements. And so I don't know if you've ever smoked a nice flower and then all of a sudden had the urge to like open and stretch or maybe twist it out. Just it's a natural inclination. And what they say in the Vedas is that the whole teachings of yoga came from the cannabis plant. So the sages, the holy men, first smoked the herb, and then it gave them the wisdom of yoga, of how to move their body, of how to breathe, of how to control the mind through mantra, of how to control through different mudras. So like this is Gyan Mudra. You probably have seen the typical yogis sitting like this, but each finger is connected to different organs within our body and different parts. So like the palms of our hands, our ears, our tongue, and the soles of our feet all have the points of our organs. If you've ever had acupuncture, acupressure as well, they'll show you that. And so when you touch the different parts of your fingertips, you're actually connecting to the organs within the body. And so they say that the cannabis plant gave them all that wisdom to know how to hold their hands to create different benefits. So Gyan Mudra, this is the ego self, and pointer finger, and we're bowing down to the universal self. So it allows this circle of energy to come around, bowing from our head, the ego self, to the heart. So that's kind of the premise of a Ganjasana ceremony, is downloading all of that wisdom and then embodying it through this practice. And so we'll go through a guided yoga practice and then go into what's called yoga nidra. And so that's laying down in shavasana and then acknowledging the body on the conscious and subconscious level. And so it kind of is a way to prepare the body for a deep sense of relaxation. And it allows us to be in such a state that we can receive the wisdom and the messages from the plant medicine that maybe we wouldn't have had if we just picked up a joint and lit it up. Because we've taken so much time and concentration and preparation to be able to integrate this experience. And it's just incredible to hear what people see or feel during that transitional state of, wow, like I've been smoking herb my whole life and I've never had these visions, or I've never had these thoughts, because the plants really are an ally for us. So they're here to help us, and they're along this journey with us. You know, the cannabis plant is just so magical in the fact that it can feed us, it can house us, it can clothe us. It's medicine. It raises our consciousness so we can rise up and be connected to one another and to the cosmos and the earth around us. And so many different religious texts, I believe, talk about this plant. Everything from the Bible and mentioning the burning bush, for example. I think that was probably a ganja plant if a whole bush is burning and then you're becoming enlightened. And then we have Lord Shiva of ganja, and different Chinese medicines talk about cannabis. And the Jamaican culture, has some of the original land races there too. So just depending on wherever you're from, cannabis seems to have a trace that it weaves through so many different cultures throughout our history. And so it's almost like our birthright to be able to work with this plant on such a spiritual level.
Is there, so it's very clear that ganja cannabis is really held highly, and it has so many amazing plant medicine uses. What other plant medicines do you also, because I see a lot on your Instagram, you don't just deal with cannabis. Like you're constantly consuming different types of plants, you're using different types of plants. Can you go through some of the other sacraments or plants that you use maybe in preparation or just on your day-to-day life for improvement?
Yeah, well, I like to say every plant has its purpose in Mother Nature's apothecary. And so even the foods that we eat are plant medicine. Like, to just flip our mindset of thinking of this is a plant medicine, this one's psychoactive, this is a food. It's really all medicine, right? Everything we put into our body. And so, on that note, I love working with all sorts of different plants. The rose flower is one of my absolute favorites. I've been incorporating rose as a tea to drink. And then also, we were chatting earlier about yoni steaming, and I do have a blend of that I put with rose petals, lady's mantle, chamomile, hemp flowers, just to name a few. And for those people out there who might not know what yoni steaming is, it's another way to work with plants specifically for women. The yoni being the womb, and you would make a tea basically. So have a bowl of the plant flower material, pour hot water in it, and then you put it in a box or a bucket and sit on top of it, and then take like a big wool blanket and put it around you to entrap the heat inside, and you let the herbs steam up into your womb. So it's another way that you can work with the plant medicines. But I really love rose, has been one that I've worked with deeply. And I'm from the East Coast, from Massachusetts, and also was living in Maine a bit. And there's a lot of wild roses, beach roses out there that I would collect. And you can use the rose hips, are really high in vitamin C, and make all sorts of different tinctures, oxymels. And oxymel is just half honey and half vinegar, apple cider vinegar. So just another way to extract the plants and take them as a tincture that way. And you could even make a rose petal joint. I've made a couple of those myself with the rose petals. You can put them in your oven at low and slow temp, and then roll up a cannabis joint with your rose petals. So it's nice to work with different companion plants there. And what else? What other plants have I really been loving working with? I mentioned the dandelion. I still absolutely love dandelions. They're great for the liver, the roots. And I have been working closely here in Colorado, learning to identify local wild, edible, and medicinal plants. And so I think that's so important just to have that knowledge and wisdom to be able to survive on this planet, on this perilous planet. And so locally here, we have a lot of comfrey, we have a lot of purslane, dandelions, what else have I seen around my neighborhood? But there's just so many that, just as I talked about how we can get to know the cannabis plant and understand its smell and the shape of the stem and the shape of the flower, and just knowing about the plant, like it's a dioecious plant. There's males and females, and what do the males look like? What do the females look like? What are each of their purposes? How can we work with both of them? It's so important for us to build these relationships and really get to know all the local plants around you.
I want to piggyback that real quick, because when I first met Rachel, she was one of the first people to speak on ayahuasca, where it wasn't necessarily either it's taboo or it's so far in the other direction that they kind of talk about maybe the more of the things that they've seen that would maybe almost hinder you from wanting to do that. And so I've heard you speak on this a few times, and I was hoping, since tonight you're here, especially when we're talking about plant health, if we could go deeper into ayahuasca and why you think that that is plant medicine, and why it's been so important to you in your life.
Yeah, I think it was important to me in terms of my greater awakening as I was understanding about plants and how to work with them. And the thing with ayahuasca too, there's a lot of controversy about it. One being it's native to the Amazon rainforest, it's indigenous to it. And so the controversy, I would say, is a lot of people say to leave the plant medicines where they are and not, necessarily bring them here to Colorado to use them. But I do think that if we approach it with a respect and a reverence, and if we're using them in right relationship with the people who govern them, then, it can be done in a respectful way. But with ayahuasca, it's quite a psychedelic, and it's not necessarily something fun that you just go do like a lot of other psychedelics that people might use recreationally. And so it's really hard work, I would say. It could be anywhere from 4 to 8 to 12 hours long for one experience. And I also like to say the plant shows you whatever you need to see. So oftentimes it's having you look at your deepest traumas in your life and reliving them. And as you do that, you might lose all of your bodily functions. You might shit yourself, or they call it being stuck in the bucket. There's a lot of purging, vomiting, crying, purging out every direction. And so it's a really humbling experience to go through that, it's not for everybody. And also it's such a powerful medicine. For example, you can't be on an SSRI and take ayahuasca. Like, there's potential of death there. So there's a lot of precautions that you need to take if you are going to work with that medicine, and even working with your doctor and making sure it's safe for you if you are on any pharmaceutical medications, because the nature of the way that the plant works, its main ingredient in ayahuasca is DMT. And to activate that, you need another plant. And so in this instance, we were using the yage leaf to activate the ayahuasca vine. And it's interesting too that you would think, out of thousands of vines in the jungle and hundreds of thousands of different plants, how did they know to take this leaf and this plant and brew it together to create this concoction? They said, they being the natives there, said, well, the plants told us, because they're so connected to nature that they have the ability to listen, to speak with nature, to observe. They observe animals. Oftentimes you observe what plants the animals are eating, to see, oh, that's safe, or um, just to understand about plants in a different way. But ayahuasca is really powerful medicine, and when done the right way, it can help people quite drastically. It's been used a lot for addiction recovery, also helping people with severe PTSD, um, helping them recover from whatever traumas they may have been going through. And I think for addiction too, goes back to having some traumas throughout our lives and then seeking that sense of connection or whatever it might be for somebody. But yeah.
Without getting into like personal things, like when you do this and you're going through these hours, is this something that you could be like one and done type thing, or you're working on it almost like with a therapist where Mother Ayahuasca is your therapist and you're seeing her once a month or every 6 months or whatever it is, and you're going real deep with it?
Yeah, that's it. That's a great way to put it, as seeing Mama Ayahuasca as your therapist. The traditional way of where I studied in Peru is they would drink for 5 nights in a row, take a night off, drink 5 more nights in a row, take a night off. And you could very well be going through this for a month, months. Some people I met down there were there for a year. So it really just depends on how much you need to go through. You could have one profound experience, and that's all that you need. But just like anything, you yourself have to do the work. So it's not like you're going to drink ayahuasca or you're going to smoke a joint and then you're going to have all your problems solved. So that's what we call integration, is the piece of actually doing the work. So, okay, this came up for me. What does this mean? How do I re-identify with this experience? And so this is where we can use our yoga practices to like move it out of our body. There's this book by Viktor Frankl called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's a lot of scientific research about how our traumas live in our cellular structures and they live in our body. And oftentimes they can turn into cancers or illness. And so that's why it's so important, I believe, to have these practices of like yoga and the meditation, the visualization to accompany the plant medicines. And so it's not just like you can, like in Western medicine, if you take a pill, you're not just going to get better overnight. You still have to do the work with the plants. And it's a journey. It's really an everlasting journey. And I think that's why we call it a practice, because I still wake up every morning and I get on my yoga mat and I sit and I meditate and then I do my yoga. And there's no like, oh, I made it, I'm fine. It's like, no, I still do this every day. Just like you wake up and you brush your teeth in the morning. It's kind of like a spiritual hygiene of like brushing the teeth of your body and your mind and your spirit. And that's why it's a practice. You do it and you integrate it into your life. And so I think the big point I want to get across there is that it's creating a lifestyle change, because whatever patterns we had that got us into that moment of dis-ease or out of harmony with ourself, that's what we need to change. And so it's really difficult to actually make those changes and to say, okay, I'm going to create a new neuronal connection. I'm going to create a new pattern today. And the first thing I do whenever I teach yoga, I have people sit. I'm sitting right now cross-legged. I have them put the opposite leg in front. Or if I tell you, okay, interlace your fingers, and then I say, okay, put the opposite thumb in front, right there, you're creating a new neuronal connection. You're doing something that is the opposite of what you always tend to do. And that is going to start to set a shift within your whole body.
So it looks like, so if you go to ganjasana.com, that's Rachel's website, she's got like different, almost like services, that you offer. And we talked about cannabis yoga and meditation. And then the next one is psychedelics and integration, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, I think, a lot. Is that a service that you actually provide in Colorado? Are people able to have you as their shaman? Or I don't know what the right term would be, but are you their guide? Can you be their guide?
Yeah, I like the term guide because I like to think of the plant or the fungi or whatever as the shaman, as the guru there. But yeah, I work with mushrooms, and I don't personally lead ayahuasca ceremony. I do assist. Um, but even though, I've been working with that plant for a long time, it is a great responsibility in working with ayahuasca. But in terms of cannabis and psilocybin, I do offer those services about preparing ourselves. So a lot of everything that I've been talking about of our yoga practices, meditation, um, to prepare ourselves, and then also to integrate these experiences because they can often be very profound and sometimes disorienting. It could be a lot to sort of feel this sense of universal connection and oneness, and then have to go back to work at your office the next day and pay your taxes. So it can be really disorienting to have that profound experience and then have to reintegrate back into society. And it's really all about finding the balance of how do we live as a human in today's world. So in yoga, for example, there's different sectors of yoga or different types of yoga. One is hatha yoga, and then another is kundalini. And so in hatha yoga, that was generally practiced by the sages who would sit in a cave all day and meditate. And so their purpose was just to hold the consciousness of the planet, and they would live off of donations and food that people gave to them. And so for us, if you are, a householder, what we call the householder's path, here I am in my home. You have bills to pay, you have lights to keep on. You can't just sit and meditate all day. And if you think you're one with everything, then you could go walk out in traffic, So we still have to be present and conscious and understand that our ego is actually something that we can fuse and become with. It's not that we want to release our egos, because the ego reminds us that the stove is hot, don't touch it, you'll get burnt, or don't walk into traffic, you will get hit by a car. um, because each part of our beings is important. And so you could think of the parts as what we might call chakras. So, like, we have our root chakra, which is at the base of the spine. And those are like our basic human needs of feeling safe and secure in the world. And then we have our sacral chakra, our solar plexus. The solar plexus is around the navel, and that's kind of like, who am I? And then it goes up into the heart space, the throat chakra, the third eye, and then our crown. And so we could be operating in, one of the seven chakras. And it's not that one's good and one's bad, but just to know where we are in time and space. And so when you're working with plant medicines, that's why it's important to have a guide, because if you're up in your crown chakra and you're connecting with the cosmos and you're having this like divine experience, or maybe you're having a really tough experience where you're in darkness and despair, you need someone there to help protect your physical body, to prevent you from hurting or harming yourself or others. And so that's kind of the purpose of the guide, is to hold the space, hold a safe container for you to explore the different parts of yourself and the different states of consciousness in a safe way. And then after you kind of, come back to earth, so to speak, to be able to integrate those experiences and talk about them. Because I think it's really important, especially now in Colorado, that we're moving through legalization and looking at who is allowed to lead these ceremonies and what licensing is going to look like. It's become really a hot topic here because it's politically motivated, I'll say. And if you think about the original shamans and medicine keepers, they were not a state board certified licensed by some organization. They were licensed, quote unquote, by their work with the earth. They've been working with these plants their whole lives. I know with ayahuasca, they start as young as 7 years old. And generally, it's their parents and their grandparents, and it's been a whole lineage in their genetic history that's been working with the plants, that's been passed down to them. So, as we start to navigate the legalities and what it's going to look like in the future, I think it's important to remember our roots and remember the ancient past of how our ancestors work with these plants. Because for me, I love being outside in nature. We were talking earlier about having your hands in the soil and like the deep connection that we feel when we touch the microbiome, the microbiology in the soil to our own microbiome. And now they're wanting us to be in a sterile doctor's office being fed mushrooms with an eye patch on. And so there's a time and place for everything. But I think there's just something so profound about having the opportunity to have these experiences within nature with a protected guide, but so you can also like observe the clouds. For example, that's one of the Native American meditations is they do a sky meditation where you just lay down and observe the sky. And to be able to open your eyes and see the world around you, I think is so, so important. And so that's been really a passion of mine, is to help people access these parts of themselves for relieving any suffering of their past, of their traumas in their life, so that they can live an empowered life, a vibrant life, and release any illnesses too that they might be experiencing, and come to a place of contentment and peace.
I wanted to throw it over to Kevin real quick. He's been sitting there patiently. It looks like he's been writing a lot.
Yeah, I'm just taking notes, writing things down. So let's back up a little bit then. And I grow roses. I love roses. My whole
Oh, beautiful.
So I've always wanted to know, like, just home. I've seen rose hips or rose buds, little bitty ones, that you would use for tea. How would I access my own roses to make to dry, like you said, and roll a cannabis joint with? Can you kind of talk a little bit more like how you would cook that, what the temperature might be, the time, and then is it crunchy or is it still soft?
Yeah, so you would take the petals when they're still soft and fresh, right off the flower, and then I put like 3 petals together, and then I would put it in the oven, almost like you're going to decarboxylate herb. So I'd put it at like 200 degrees, or a really low temperature, for maybe just 1 minute or less. And kind of, because everyone's ovens are a little bit different, but I would do like a minute or so, and then you take it out and then you roll up your joint in those rose petals, so that the petals should kind of act now as like a rolling paper, so you can like lick them and have the 3. I usually do 3 petals and put them together, and then just you could put it back in the oven with the herb in it, or just smoke it like that. And you can also put the rose petals, you could dry them and make a blend with your cannabis herbs and smoke it together.
Wow. That's cool. I have never heard anyone tell me to do that one. So thank you. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
it's really beautiful, like floral, depending on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. The taste. What's it taste like with rose petals then?
It tastes like you think a rose would taste, if you've ever had rose tea, or it tastes kind of sweet and floral. And I like to use the word like a beautiful taste and sensation. And roses are said to have, I forget the number hertz. I think it's like 432 hertz vibration. So they're supposed to be like one of the most balancing vibrational flowers on the planet. So just
Nice.
being in your rose garden can be healing for you.
And
Oh, yeah.
let's just talk real quick because you know, this is probably not something you're going to want to do with a bouquet you bought at the grocery store. I think
Probably
that
not.
there's probably a very almost more importance to ensuring that kind of plant is grown in a regenerative fashion, which is why what a lot of the people that listen to this show and in our community, I would say our regenerative community, here's another powerful thing about what it is that you do by minimizing the caustic inputs, is that you unlock plants that would otherwise likely be horrendous to smoke, and you're able to unlock that power and actually use it, which you talked about companion planting, and like that was kind of what I was thinking when you were talking about the other plants you use in medicine, is that this group of people and growing, organically no-till, we understand the importance of companion planting. There's not always a definitive use for all of the plants that we plant in companion with, our cannabis, but it lends another use to these things, like teas, like maybe just a tea to drink, or a yoni tea for females, or compresses for everybody. It's really amazing to find a deeper meaning and purpose in these plants that we're growing that we know are good for our cannabis. They offer things to the garden, to protect our main crops, and even our food crops. Companion plants have many different uses and reasons, but unlocking more so that you can actually use your companion plant other than just a banker plant for attracting aphids or keeping things off of what you see as the money plant.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I think that, back to the soil, it's so important that we have things like companion plants and cover crops and even the mycelium that's in the soil. And you're probably familiar with Jeff Lowenfeld's trilogy of books, Teeming with Microbes, Teeming with Fungi, and Teeming with Nutrients. But I'm just so fascinated by, I think it's the Teeming with Fungi book. They have the first images from the electron microscope, and they have an image of a predatory nematode that was coming to eat the roots by the rhizosphere of a plant, and a fungus what caught the predatory nematode. And so it was the first time we've ever seen that fungus can catch an animal, and how beneficial it is to have in our soil. And so that's, another reason cannabis in particular loves mycelial dominated soil rather than bacterial dominated soil for that reason. And so that's why we don't till, because we don't want to take all of those mycelial networks out of order, and we want to keep them stable within our plants. And then having lots of companion plants. I had a sunflower growing in my garden with my ganja plants this past summer. And so just, for fun. But then you can eat the sunflower seeds as well. And so I generally take my cover crops and chop and drop them so they become mulch around the plants, and really thinking about having a protective layer of the soil. But of course, as you were mentioning, is that we can also use the plants that we grow with them. So I had some kale growing along with my ganja plants, and then I ate the kale. I took out the stems and fed those to my worms. And so really it's all about closing the loop in these cycles. And then through this practice of Ganjasana, I like to think of us as part of this intrinsic loop. And so, our breath, our movements, when we put our hands into the soil, like we are a part of this cycle. And it's funny because not a lot, but a few people I had seen in this community were feeding their soil better than themselves. Like they would take all the time to top dress and companion plant and then go eat Taco Bell. And so just remember that you are a part of this cycle too, and that, you know, everything we put into our plants, we also want to take all of that same intention of everything that we put into and on top of our bodies, and really you know, a lot of things we can use interchangeably, like bentonite clay is like an amendment that you might put into your soil. And I was using that topically on my skin, on my body. It helps like draw out toxins. And so just seeing like how connected we really are to the plants in our garden.
So, guys, for those of us tuning in, and for people that watch this show on every week, you know that the essence of this show is to connect with the community as much as it is for the three of us to be able to hit Rachel with these questions. So, don't forget to drop your questions. We have several questions lined up from the community for you, Rachel. But for anybody that's heard something.
So he just dropped his mic.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. For those, so if you have questions of anything that Rachel has talked about, please don't hesitate to drop them, because it helps us all hit the things that maybe we didn't think about that are burning with you. So, and the other thing is if you guys like this show, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. It helps us to reach more people. It helps us to get the good word out that on this stuff that doesn't get talked about enough.
Rachel, I have a question for you. Whenever you're done, Mark. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Kev.
You were holding up some cannabis flower. Can I ask what strain that is, or what?
Oh yeah, this is the runts. This is just a little nug, but this is the runts.
All right, the runts. Do you use rosins or concentrates?
I do, but not often. I feel like for myself, I use it in time and place. I know when I'm on my cycle as a female, I really like to save a concentrate for then, because I feel I get really bad cramps, for example, and I feel like it gives me that deep high, body high that I need to relieve any pain in my body. So I don't generally use concentrates, but I don't have anything against them, so to speak. But I mostly just prefer the straight up flower.
And how about as far as trying to keep your tolerance in check? Are you kind of moderating the amount that you consume with that in mind? Because for me personally, I'm on a tolerance break right now, which has been really great, just to clear the mind, because it kind of became this monotonous task. You know what I mean? It almost like abusing the power of it, and not taking it for granted. And that's really not at all what I wanted. But, just with the way that life goes, and just the way that our habits form, is that it sometimes becomes that. So is there work that you do to make sure that you're moderating your use so that it keeps as powerful an effect on you? Because I noticed that too, is like it stopped having such a profound impact on me after it kind of became a routine.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Like, for example, I have not used any cannabis today or yesterday at all, because I didn't feel the need to. And I just did a deep detox cleanse for 28 days. And so I didn't have any cannabis or coffee. I actually did a juice cleanse. So I just had raw juiced fruits and vegetables for 28 days. So that included no other herbs. And I had never felt greater and clearer in my life. So I think it's important, just like any plant or substance that has potential for us to misuse it or overuse it, to use it when we need it. And, some of us have stress every day. And so, or we have chronic pain. And so we might be using it on a daily basis, and that's okay because you're using it for that specific intention. But I think it's also great to take all these tools to increase your awareness of how, for example, different genetic cultivars might affect you from one time to another, or your mode of consumption. If you're going to take a dab of something, also keep in mind to have it be solventless. And, just as we don't want to be smoking pesticides and fungicides and herbicides, we also don't want to be smoking like propylene glycol, PG, or you don't want to be smoking the butane from your lighter, using like a hemp wick, for example, to really keep it clean as possible when we work with the plants. And I think that's where that sense of honoring the plants comes in, is having it be this like a sacred prayer almost in working with the plants and saying, okay, do I need some plants right now? I think so, for whatever reason or your intention is. And then noticing how that plant makes you feel, just like taking a moment to notice that.
I have a middle school sounding question for you. Can you smoke chamomile?
Can you?
No.
I think
Like, it
so.
smells so good. I grew it this summer. It smelled like brown sugar, cinnamon. It was awesome. I was wondering if it would flavor like the rose petal
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, I think the flowers you can. I have had different herbal blends with rose petals, for example. I've had some with like blue lotus flower, which the Egyptians used to use or still use with cannabis. And then you could have the flowers on their own. So there's other herbs that you could smoke. I know mullein is an expectorant. And so if you mix that with cannabis, it'll help to open your lungs. And an expectorant is something that like cleans out our lungs. And so if you have like a deep cough, you can also make a mullein tea. And so there's all different herbs that we can smoke. I know there's some we can't, but I'm pretty sure you could smoke chamomile.
All right. I don't plan on using it, but man, I'm telling you, the tea, the flower itself is right beside a bunch of pole beans, but the flowers smelled so good. And I was totally sad when it was all gone, because I just grew like one plant that I got at a herb festival. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to grow it. The guy said it smells amazing. And it did. It was brown sugar, cinnamon, oatmeal. I mean, I loved it, but my wife and I had tea twice with it, and we loved it. We loved it. So more is coming.
I was gonna say, I really, one of my go-to nighttime teas is chamomile, holy basil, and fennel, and it's like it is an amazing. It's amazing for pre-bedtime, just to get your mood right, and it just tastes so good. Highly recommend anyone to grow chamomile as a companion plant. There is nothing negative about growing chamomile in the garden. And the thing about these herbs is that they're naturally pest resistant. So you're really not going to have to worry about anything as far as bugs eating them. Because I went down this tea rabbit hole, and I'm like, are there pesticides on tea? Are they spraying these things? And a lot of the teas that are grown are naturally pest resistant, so that's not even necessary.
Yeah, it depends on the brand. Some teas could have pesticides, but if you're growing it in your garden, certainly not. But yeah, I would always check the herbs and make sure.
I learned too, the tea bag makes a big difference as well. So if it's the bleached, like cheaper teas that you would see, I guess that kind of negates all of the supposed health benefits.
Yeah, tea bags, and they could also have plastic in them, and then you're putting hot water onto the plastic. Microplastics are leaching in. I'm a big fan of the French press I have, so I always make my tea in my glass French press, or even like a old school teapot I love using. And I also have like a yerba mate straw, so you could buy the herbs in bulk, and it's fun to like make different concoctions of your tea blends and put it into a cup or a bowl and just drink it out that way.
I have another question for you, Rachel. You explained the drink bong that you described earlier.
Yeah, so it's BHANG, bang, and it's a drink that in the story of Shiva, he made the drink out of cannabis and milk and honey, and those were very sacred. The milk and the honey and the cannabis was one of the 5 sacred herbs. Actually, holy basil is another sacred herb, as well as sandalwood, jasmine, and neem. And so when you could put different spices in there, sometimes you could add like rose or cardamom or cinnamon to your bong drink and drink it like a tea. And so it's just another way to be able to work with the cannabis plant. And so if you think about like the milk is the lipid that's going to help extract the cannabis out, and then the honey is a sweetener in there. And so when they all come together, it's that profile to be able to have all of the cannabinoids and the terpenes from the flower extracted into the tea.
Is it a hot drink?
Yes. Yep. Generally hot.
And is it a flower being crushed, or is it just a piece of chunky bud placed in it? Is it hash? What form of cannabis is in the tea?
Generally I use a flower, like if you're crushing up a flower and then doing it with hot milk. And you could use like a hemp milk if you don't do dairy, and with honey. So like a hot flower tea. You can even put the stems in there too and let it simmer for 20, 30 minutes. Have a big tea. I was at a farm once, and we had a big pot of it, and we had flowers, stems, seeds, everything in there, just cooking together to make that bong tea. And you can drink it ceremonially, so in a circle with your friends. They say when 2 or more gather, Jah be there. And so, when 2 or more come together with the ganja plant, Jah arises, or boom, Shiva comes there. So that's kind of the history of the bong drink.
What temperature and how long are you cooking it for, please?
I would simmer it low. You don't ever want to like boil the water too hot. And, you can let it sit for just a couple minutes to like 20 minutes, let it sit with the lid on. So like simmer the water hot and then turn it off and keep the lid on and just let it sit.
More like an herbal tea than like a black tea that has like a steep time.
Yeah.
That goes bitter. It probably it won't taste any worse if it sits longer.
Mm-hmm. And, you can put as much or as little honey as you want, depending on how sweet you want it.
That's awesome. I love having a better understanding of ways to respect this plant more. Because, like I said, it's easy to take it for granted, especially now that it's legal. And now that we're starting to master these skills in the garden, it's time now to take inventory and to have respect for it, and serve it like it serves us. So I love these ideas, and the ceremony of it brings so much better of an understanding of the power of this thing to me. And it, like where I was really kind of awakened to the ceremony a little bit more was at Camp Compost. Did you go to Camp Compost?
I haven't been yet. I need to come out there though.
Yes, this is your people.
Yeah.
This is a group of people that could really learn a lot from you. And it just is different when you're in nature with like-minded people on the same wavelength. Job be with you, it's just amazing. So yeah, I hope I get the pleasure of seeing you out there sometime. It's in Michigan, northern Michigan. If nobody's ever heard of it, go to campcompost.com. But Brian, do you want to get into some questions? I know we have some community questions here, and this has been such a great conversation with you. I feel like we're gonna have to recoup and come up with more questions once we kind of digest what we've learned from you today, because
I
it's
have a lot of questions still, Rachel. I want you to know that. And I'm sure we'll not get to all of
Yeah.
mine because we have so many over here.
so. Brian, you want to jump into some questions, brother?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Ms. Rachel. To be clear, I also want you guys to know that Ms. Rachel's been doing this for a very, very long time. I think I even learned about some of the stuff you were talking about in like 2015. So we are starting to, I would say you're once you've hit a decade in teaching something, which I'm sure you've surpassed that. There's something to be said about that. And so if someone's really wanting to dive into this, I just wanted to co-sign that you've been in Denver or around teaching Denver Normal, all of the things in the early days of cannabis, some of the more organizations that I think people wanted to support at first. None of that really exists anymore. Like nobody, there's no real education or anything like that. So just wanted to highlight that, Rachel. You've been around, you know what you're talking about. And when you speak on ayahuasca, I am all ears because it's very intriguing to me that a plant could take you and kind of almost like teach you a lesson about life in just 12 hours or so. So first question for Rick, and shout out to Rick. I believe he is coming on next week. I've heard of shamans planning their meditation with solar winds. So I kind of wanted to talk more about that. It does seem like shamans, like you had mentioned before, when the plant's telling you to use 2 concoctions and then you're going to use that. And I would imagine the first time the shamans were on this ayahuasca trip, they thought they were probably going to die. So trusting the plants and all of that, I was wondering, that's got to go on a whole deeper level. So just wanted to talk about that from a solar's wind point.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar about the solar winds in particular. But I do know that, taking into account the cosmos, so like as above, so below, if you're familiar with biodynamic farming, right? We'll look at where the moon is at. So if it's a new moon, it's the darkest time versus the full moon, we have the most light. And so now we know through science that our pineal gland acts like an aperture on a camera. And so it's connected, like our circadian rhythms are connected to the moon. And so on a new moon, oftentimes for women in particular, the pineal gland would signify us to go into our cycles or, menstruation cycle. And on the full moon, it is signifying for a woman to ovulate. And so when we look at shamans, and men as well have these cycles, but on a weekly basis. So women have a monthly basis cycle, and men have a weekly basis cycle of their sperm production, actually. And so just looking at like the sun, moon, and stars, as Rudolf Steiner would say, a lot of different cultures and shamans take that into consideration if they're going to have a meditation or a shamanic ceremony under the light of a full moon versus a new moon. So I think that could be taken definitely into consideration as well.
Well said. And then one more from Rick. How do I get these blue passion flower seeds to pop, and is it worth it? Is he asking?
blue passion flower seeds. Well, I always like to put my seeds into some water to pop them, say a little prayer. I did hear that if you germinate seeds in your saliva, it can potentially read your DNA and like cannabis seeds and read your personal endocannabinoid system. And when you germinate it in your saliva, the seeds, in theory, will produce the cannabinoids that you are lacking in. So just a little side
Woo!
note
You
on
just
that.
changed my ways, man. You just changed my ways. Wow.
But for blue passion flower seeds to pop, I mean, is it worth it? Yeah, it's always worth it, right? They say gardening is an act of hope. And so, you know, try it out, right? We all the best we can do is try. And I like to put my seeds in some water to pop them and then put them in a little soil. Depends on the size of the seeds. I believe blue passion flower are probably pretty small. I'll go lick. I see your comment. I'll lick my seeds after this. Exactly. That's the way. Really connect with your plants intimately.
I will be doing that myself, Rick. That's fantastic. I just like the idea that that could possibly be a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, nature is always working with us, and that is just as a side note, there's a whole theory of epigenetics, which says that our genetics are not predetermined, that we can actually change our genetics through our mind, through our meditation, through the foods that we eat, through our thoughts, through the way that we move through the world, rather than saying, I was born with a gene for cancer because it's hereditary. And so, through the concept of epigenetics, we can again co create with our plant medicine. So, the example would be using your saliva to germinate a cannabis seed so that it can produce cannabinoids that you are deficient in. It's always about bringing balance, right? We're always trying to come back to homeostasis. And so, that's one way that we could do it.
Man, that's really good. I think we talked with Matt Powers about growing generations of like if you breeding in the same soil, growing generations of seeds back into the same soil, and it just has or maybe it was Quatamok. It has like a memory of the carbon structure, something like that. It was just again mind blowing, kind of like what you just did a minute ago. That plants and soils and microbes, they just have a memory, an understanding of each other, and they have a growing understanding and a working relationship, and I love the idea of it of getting your own saliva onto a seed, letting it recognize who you are, your DNA, putting it in your own soil, introducing it to a soil that's going to stay in forever. It's like a home. Pretty cool.
It almost lends itself to, it's like, is that adaptogenic almost in a way? Like tailoring to whatever the needs are.
Exactly right. And when you think about the soil, like I have some of my same no-till pots I've had 10 plus years of the same soil that just been replanting in and re-amending on top, but really keeping it pretty much no-till. And depending on your garden, you can even leave the root mass in there once you harvest through the winter. I have snow. I have some outside. They're covered in snow. And as soon as the snow melts, there will be ready to be planted right back into.
Yeah, and that was what Quatamok was talking about, was like the carbon and the honeycomb structure keeping
right.
almost it keeps like a memory, like it's a hard drive almost. So when you plant back into that, the new root growth kind of taps into that that hard drive essentially, and gets the knowledge of its predecessors essentially, which is just truly fascinating.
It
Yeah.
is.
All right. Another question here from Ms. Rachel is from Green Man. Any suggestions on how to use crystals? I would imagine he's talking more about quartz crystals. I think more of like a scientific mind, right? Especially myself. In the earlier days, I always like kind of dismissed this stuff. My mom is totally into the crystals. She believes probably a lot more on your side of things, Rachel. So it was always nice to kind of butt heads with her on this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
she recently came out here. I just wanted to say that she was pointing out to me all these new crystals, I guess, that cell phones are thinking about using um, to improve like the cell quality and all this kind of stuff. So she was basically getting at, so what do you think about this kind of stuff now? And it, I'm eating my words basically as I'm starting to understand more about yoga and more about quartz crystals and all this kind of stuff that they're to dismiss it almost makes me now feel so foolish to be this kind of a midpoint in my life. And I've had my mother teaching me this since I was growing up and not really listening to it at all.
Once again, Mama knew, huh?
Mama knew.
Yeah, the crystals are a mineral, right? We mineralize our soil. So if you think of it from a molecule perspective, you want to have diverse minerals within your soil. And the quartz crystal, that's how we're talking right now. Satellites are made out of quartz crystals, and that's how we're communicating. So if you think about communication within the soil food web, we talked about the mycelium. In theory, it seems like it would help them communicate. I do have a couple crystals I've put on top of my plant beds, more for fun. I'm not necessarily sure it's doing anything. But the thing about crystals too is they also hold an imprinted memory. So whatever source you got it from, sometimes people say to put crystals in salt to like clear the crystal before you go ahead and use it. And so it, just like any mineral, they have a certain frequency to them. And there's different types of crystals that we have. Like right here, I have my rose quartz. I love the rose and the rose quartz crystal. And it holds your energy, so to speak, your imprinted memory into it. And so when you put that into the plant, that's the frequency that you're putting into the microscopic soil food web. I forget the name of this woman. I was at a plant conference and she was talking about numbers of crystals, and I believe it was the Fibonacci sequence, and she put like 17, I think the number was 17 quartz crystals in the base of her no-till soil pots, and was experimenting with how that affected the growth of the overall plant. And she found benefit from it. Don't quote me on that. I believe it was 17. So, in different types of minerals hold different energy. Like if you see this one here is very different than the rose quartz, having like a onyx, a black onyx, and could be really grounding versus maybe you put this lower into the soil. But we can work with them in different ways. But again, for me, it all comes back to our intention and what you put into it, and then what you're going to get out of it.
Well said. All right, Bears Grow It. Just two more questions, Rachel, and then
Yeah.
Do you think we could reverse trauma and viruses and disease by utilizing foods grown in substrates rich in indigenous microorganisms and fed animal meats who eat those same vegetables and fruit? So basically going back to how it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of reversing traumas, like we'll always have that experience. But for example, a lot of mental health issues, they say, is either a deficiency or an overload of different minerals. Like one of them I've been reading about is copper in the body. Like a lot of us don't have enough And so that creates mental health issues. And so when we have the right minerals in the soil for the plants to then uptake for us to eat, and we have a balanced diet, our minds become balanced. And so it doesn't even matter like what awful traumas you've lived through in your life. But when you can do that thing, which is mindfulness, come to this present moment right here, it's because you have everything that you need for your body to work efficiently. And with that being said, there's a lot that goes into detoxing as well. So, like fasting, water fasting, or juice fasting and cleansing can also be really healthy for the body to like clear out our gut, because the gut and the brain connection is so tied together. And so when we clear that out of all of the toxins that we've built up throughout our lives to kind of give ourselves like a clean slate to start with, and then eating really healthy foods. And again, it's always back to the soil, right? We need those microorganisms, we need the minerals and the substances within the soil for the plants to be able to uptake. So absolutely, I think that, food is medicine. And when we eat like good food is good medicine.
Yeah, I think at this day and age, we've kind of forgotten, or at least as we've gotten older, you kind of forget what food used to be. And I like on Instagram, there's a craze lately of like, it's okay, it's the same thing I used to eat when I was a kid, or something of that version. And then it'll show like Fruit Loops when you ate the Fruit Loops compared to now with all these different poisons and dyes and all of this kind of stuff. So secretly, all of this has been injected without really anybody knowing, and it's eye-opening to see what this potentially has been doing over the years. When I've started to study chronic inflammation, it seems like that's kind of the root of almost all illnesses that are self-inflicted, is that you eat too much sugar, you don't go outside, you're in front of blue light. That's why you see Mark and I wearing these glasses, because we had a gentleman on here that made me realize if I'm in front of this damn thing all day, and I got a little light in front to do the background stuff, so I got extra blue light on there.
Yeah.
The glasses made a lot of sense. So you in the same way, you've been talking about this stuff for a long time, and I don't think everybody was, wanting to listen about food and all of those things in the early days of having those normal meetings and stuff, and how important it is to have nutrient dense food. I'm on the hilltop with that for, with you now, is like, holy shit. I mean, health is wealth. And if you've never experienced any kind of like horrible thing happen with your health, you realize that all of a sudden all those problems that you thought you had go away, because now it's all about just trying to get healthy. And so it's eye-opening to go through some of these things. And we don't want to keep you too long. So this last question is selfishly from me. My children, I have 2 kids under 2, and they are having allergies. Like I didn't know that could happen, to be honest. And so my son has just got back his blood. He has his blood results as well from this. He did the scratch and there's all this stuff, and now the bloods. And it's milk and eggs. There's a lot of other things, but the milk and eggs is the main thing that kind of scares me a little bit, because it's in everything. So if my son can't have cow's milk and all this kind of stuff, and I was learning more about almond milk, and that seems almost like a gimmick, if I'm being honest about it. Is hemp milk, the ability with the proteins and all that stuff being natural, an alternative for people that can't have cow's milk?
Yeah, absolutely. So hemp milk is just the hemp heart or the seeds. And so there's no dairy in it. And, the thing, if you're going to buy milk, though, a lot of times they do have additives like carrageenan, for example, can be inflammatory. And so it's really easy to make it yourself at home. If you have a blender, you can just buy hemp hearts, put them in the blender with water, and then you get like a cheesecloth or any cloth and strain it out. So it's just hemp hearts, water, and you can do that with any nut too. I don't know if your children or anyone's kids have nut allergies. I know a lot of kids have nut allergies these days, but the same thing. If you have almonds, I soak my almonds overnight and then put them in the blender with water, squeeze it out, and that's it. And then you have almond milk. It doesn't last very long because there's no preservatives in it, so you want to drink it within the next couple days. But it's a great way to make it yourself and not have any additives in there.
What is the hemp heart? Is that the inside of the stalk?
That's the seeds.
Gotcha. So you just need a lot of hemp seeds, which are, I think those are available at a large scale to buy, aren't they? Because there's not.
Most grocery stores have hemp hearts, and you can get organic hemp hearts. Yeah.
Are you saying hemp
Costco sells them.
hearts or hemp parts?
I'm saying hearts. They call them hearts, but
Yeah.
I believe it's the seed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like, I just saw Rick was talking about beef. I've been taking beef liver, my wife as well, in pill form because I can't imagine eating that shit. And there is something to that as well. So fasting and then taking beef liver. I'd love to talk about that on like part 2 with you at some time, Rachel, because I
Yeah.
think nutrient dense anything is the knowledge is lacking, especially in the cannabis space. You mentioned everybody takes care of their no-till plants, and then you see them. We're up all night long, drinking, smoking. Probably a lot of us not even eating, and it's
Yeah.
extremely detrimental to our health when we're kind of living that lifestyle.
Got to take just as good care of your own bodies, and everyone's bodies are different. I just want to point that out. Like, our blood types are different. There's blood type diets, and for myself, I am extremely anemic, so I don't have enough blood in my body, so I eat liver and organ meats every day. So it just kind of
Wow.
depends on like what your body needs.
You're already on the. I've found it amazing. Like, I want to get off energy drinks. I know it's going to take a little bit, but it does seem like whatever is in very expensive, grass-fed, grass-finished, pasture-raised, you have to have all that verbiage in there. But the beef liver that's in that stuff is amazing. Like, I feel it like
There's a
in
lot
your
of
body.
plants that give us energy too, so if you want to get off an energy drink like maca and ashwagandha and mushrooms like lion mane, chi, and even adding dandelion can be like a coffee replacement, cacao, and making a concoction of all of those together, or some seeing what you like and what agrees with your body. But those plants can be really powerful. I love maca.
Right on.
You said maca, ashwagandha, lion's mane, which I currently I've been putting a lot of adaptogenic mushrooms in my
Mhm.
teas because I've recently got off the energy drinks. The coffee's a little too acidic for me,
Yeah.
and so I've been going deep into teas, and I don't know. I guess I do because there's been days where I haven't added the mushrooms to my teas, and I definitely feel like a less clarity, more brain foggy almost, and it's like a hard thing to kind of explain. Do you get a profound effect from ashwagandha? Is that, like you said, maca and ashwagandha are like probably your go-to?
I put them in my tea every morning.
And those are in like a powdered form?
Mhm.
Is there like a source? Like, is there anything? Because you go online, you search for this stuff, and you mentioned it with teas. Knowing your
Mhm.
brands, knowing where it's coming from is really important. What is it that you would look out for when you source these things?
Well, I guess certified organic, although to be honest, being a farmer, I know that the NOP, the National Organic Program, does allow a whole bunch of pesticides now, approved pesticides in the certified organic, but there are some good trusted companies out there. I source a lot of herbs from like mountain rose herbs, for example, out of Oregon. I buy a lot of in bulk herbs from there. Um, but keeping it local, your local apothecary here in Boulder, we have Rebecca's Apothecary. I get a lot of my herbs from as well. So having people you trust, or even taking it a step further and growing it yourself if you can. But yeah, just making sure it's at least certified organic herbs.
I think that's important. We spend a lot of time making sure we're growing our cannabis to the highest level of standard, which goes above and beyond what the National Organic, OMRI, CDNA, like you said, they allow now the approved pesticides and approved additives that meet the intent of what organic should be in their mind, coming from likely a lab,
Yeah.
so. And these are the same people that are approving the foods that we eat, which have lost their nutrient density, lost their plant medicine abilities. So I think it's really important to know where anything going into your body is really coming from. And that's why I love cannabis, because like seems like that is the place where people start to become cognizant of what is going in their body, because it has a profound effect for a lot of people. Seems like it's a profound effect that goes beyond the effects that you feel from eating good food, good produce, good meat, or taking good supplements. And so it opens our eyes to that, and being mindful of what it is that we're actually consuming. And I love your grasp on all this stuff, Rachel. It's empowering for me. I've learned a lot from this conversation. For people that are looking for more from you, I mean, if somebody wanted to connect with you, can you tell us how we get a hold of you, and the ways that you do your teachings? Is it just in person? Like, can someone in across the country utilize you as their coach and guide?
Yeah, absolutely. I do work online as well. I'm just about to launch some online cannabis yoga classes. And then March 2nd, we're having a cannabis conference online. So everyone's welcome to that. And you can find me at Ganjasana.com. It's all of my handles on social media as well.
Fantastic. Really appreciate you, Rachel. Kevin, what do you have going on, brother? Any shout outs?
Shout out to Rachel. First of all, wow, you're fantastic to listen. Awesome speaker. Thank you very much for being here tonight. I hope we get to have you back sometime soon. So go check out her website, guys. Support her. Also, my website, okcalyxshop.com. We're about to have a lot of Bokashi ready, a lot of IMO3, the IMO3 starter packs. Spring is coming. I just posted today on Instagram. My garden is covered in snow right now, but nonetheless, grow time is about to happen. Potatoes and onions can go down first, guys. I'm telling you, if you're a gardener in Oklahoma, zone 6A, 7A, right around in there, it should be time for you to get outside. So go check the website out, okcalyxshop.com. Thanks again, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.
How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I was actually in Loveland this past weekend. The Show Me Show, the reptile shows. Appreciate everybody that supports us, especially selling out of a lot of the isopods. That allows me to know that you guys appreciate the bioactive side of things, going deeper into it, having fun with the stuff, teaching you guys how to do this from a cannabis-based, like living soil setup, but now from building up your isopods, to design our isopods, keeping that stuff without having them with fungus gnats, thrips, whiteflies. You're learning all of that stuff using MI Beneficial's products. I feel like the Loveland community out there in the reptile space, they are willing to learn a lot of this. So just shout out to everybody that's supporting what we're doing. The education is going a long way. I'll see you next weekend in Colorado Springs. Mark?
Yeah, and just a huge thanks to everybody for tuning in. It's lots of words of encouragement coming in the comments. This is a community that likes to help build each other up, and I really appreciate that, because we all know that the cannabis space can be a nasty place. And having people like Rachel, who are shining light in this community, who are constantly sharing knowledge, sharing experience, and not afraid to talk about these sometimes, controversial things, is really a breath of fresh air, and it's an honor to be on a podcast where that's our mission. So big thanks to you again, Rachel. Thanks to the co-hosts here, and thanks to the community for continuing to support this show and continuing to support the guests that we have come on this show to make this time spent worth it. Until next week, guys, stay mindful, stay regenerative, and take care of yourselves. Good night.
Thank you.